Welcome to Strange World, where the truth is often stranger than fiction. I'm your host, Mark Sargent, the creator of Flat Earth Clues, which propose that all of us are living inside a Truman Show enclosed structure, thousands of miles wide. Check it out at enclosedworld.com or just Google Flat Earth Clues. My wingman for the show normally would be Jonathan from Jersey, but unfortunately, he is currently embedded with a Russian infantry battalion in an undisclosed location, part of Operation Green Helmet? I don't know if that's right. We should confirm that. That's a strange name. Not sure what that's about. But no, he's out for this week. So we are joined by the grandson of Commander Graham Bethune, Trevor Purvis. Graham Bethune, the most credible UFO witness, I think, of all time, and also known as
Space Grandpa.
Space Grandpa. Hey, Trevor, how's it going?
Good. How you doing? I think if I keep joining you, I may have to disappear on a mission as well. So we'll see what happens there.
Exactly.
Well, you're listening to the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable, episode number 3 on Wednesday, June 24, 2015.
If it was a government ops, it's just more evidence that CIA and government sucks, because look what they did. Because now I'm doing videos, so thanks, Mark, if you're a shill. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Mark, as we said before the chat, if you are a shill, you're doing a horrible job.
I'm doing a horrible job if I'm a shill. Please, anyone that wants to call me a shill, tell me how I am hurting this movement, because it has gotten so much. So I mean, look at the thousands of videos that have come out, and you know, I am not professing myself to be any sort of leader in this. Look, I just put out some videos, thought I'd make a couple points. If let's put it this way, if I am a shill, then there's no reason for me to go after. Look, shills are pretty much under orders. You do not go after the U.S. government. You do not go after a very high-profile military wing known as NASA, which I firmly believe that you know. And I'll say this in the show on Saturday that I'm doing, and that is, look, I'll come out and say it. Look, NASA needs to be shut down. Anybody that's doing subcontractor work for these guys needs to get out of there. If you own stock in a public company that is tied to NASA, get out, because these guys have a shelf life at this point. They're not going to hold up. The internet hive mind, social media, and if they end up being the fall guy for this, great. I stated that in one of my videos. Look, they are the first people that are going to have to go down in a twisted pile of molten metal. I am going to spend all my efforts trying to dismantle NASA, because they're the gatekeepers for me. They're the ones that, if there's going to be a fall guy in this, it's going to be them. And they've made too many errors over the years, and I'm going to call them out on every one of them. So yeah, if I'm a shill, I should not be able to say that, and I am saying that. So please stop calling me a shill, and I have to blame Eric. I'm not going to pick on you too much, Eric, but you were the one that started this.
Well, you know, I'll have to interject there. There are other reasons that people might suggest. I mean, people will say, well, sometimes a shill has to give good information, and they have to accidentally wake people up, but at the same time, they'll muddy the waters. For instance, if they give models that don't work, or if they give models that don't stand up to scrutiny, or if they throw in little things into their model that will turn people off instantly, such as if they start talking about the creators of the dome, or if they start talking about the moon, you know, their models for the moon not making sense. I mean, the idea is if some of the objections, Mark, is if your model doesn't stand up to proper scrutiny, then even though you're putting in some good info, maybe you're muddying the waters. What do you say to that?
Well, and I completely understand. And I've also got I should probably address, it's like, look, I understand I've done a lot of interviews recently. And you also have to understand, I solicited none of these people. Every one of them called me, and they sort of fed off each other. You know, it was like, oh, well, if he's doing it, it was kind of like everyone was daring each other. Oh, I'm going to do an interview about flat Earth. But once the first few started doing it, it became fair game. But as far as what you're talking about with the model standpoint, I tried to remain as neutral and open-minded as possible. Again, not what a shill does. The hubcap model, notice I didn't say roulette table. The hubcap model is not that much different from the tabletop flat model. and not different enough to where if there's something wrong with that model, all of a sudden you have to throw flat Earth out the window. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. The moon, when where I say, look, there's a 3D structure, with the moon, something being overlaid on the top of it. If the difference between that and a 2D model, which Eric goes down, again, not much of a difference, which is why he and we still never had really a debate, because we're not debating over that many little, that many points that make any difference, regardless of what the model is, what exactly it looks like, and that's what this thing is really all about. Everyone's got to understand, the skeptics that are out there, that something's being hidden from us. The world is not what you think it is. It does not look what you think it is. Now, it may be ridiculous to use the words flat Earth. I completely agree, which is why I went with the enclosed world option. That is, look, if it's artificial, if this whole place was made, designed, then gravity is a mechanical process, and by that I mean, and I've said this in multiple interviews, and that is, from a design standpoint, it is a form of molecular magnetism, for lack of a better word, and that is, imagine a magnet that can grab anything. Instead of just metal, it can grab organics, clay, wood, sand. It makes no difference, and that is because really, what's the difference between molecular magnetism and what you call density? Is it really the same thing? I don't know. Gravity, even for mainstream science, is a tricky thing. I like to think it's a mechanical process, because then it can be adjusted like anything else. I don't think there's anything left to chance in this system. I think everything is controlled at one point or another. If you want to call it divine, if you want to call it advanced technology, it's one thing. But again, if it turns out to be just flat old density and there's something else behind it, yeah, great. But for me, it's mechanical.
Okay.
For me, I try to go, I try to break it down a little bit more, get more granular in, definition. But again, if people want to go with density, that's fine.
Okay. I mean, if you're using the roulette table map, I mean, how does water curve?
Oh, in that case,
water always seems to be leveling out.
Yeah, in that case, you would have to use mine, which is molecular, some sort of molecular magnetism, absolutely, because then you'd have to control the water on all sides. And again, the tabletop flat model works better with water. I'll be the first one to admit that. It's not the one I would use, just because I like the sunrise and sunsets, how they work on the roulette table a little better. I know people, because water flows downhill naturally, and it flows, you want to go with that because, well, we see it in nature. It's like, yeah, but maybe you could artificially control that. I believe it can. So, but again, if I am proven wrong in the end, it still does not change the fact that the ball model, the globe model, seems to be an endangered species at this point. And I know some people are going to go into the curvature, which I didn't. They're going to go into things about gravity, but it's like, look, people can do experiments all they want with curvature and gravity, and I have no problem with that. Unfortunately, for me, they weren't broad enough strokes to go to the lowest common denominator. There's people out there that, again, if once you say, oh yeah, by the way, the curvature is 8 inches per mile squared, they're just going to glaze over. There's some people who are going to get it. Some people, some smart people, they're going to get that. But
so at the first mile, is it 8 inches or is it 36 inches, or I can't remember what it was.
I've heard a couple different things, so I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
Also, people I've heard say you don't start till the second mile. So if you're looking at 5 miles distance, you would actually take that 8 times 4 times 4, or 8 times 5 times 5.
But it starts escalating pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a parabola, so it gets real steep real fast.
Got it. The two big ones that I touched on that even now I've got to harp, because you can't debunk it. Again, that panel didn't touch it. The big one, the first big one, is the airline flights in the southern hemisphere, which is the debunking one that I got started on from that guy from Germany, because I looked at it and I was going, no, it can't be. And that is, there's the plane routes in the southern hemisphere, everything below the equator, so if you're the big ones, if you're flying from South America to Australia, are really up if you're looking at it from a globe standpoint. And that is, oh, hey, Jaredism just finally showed up. Nice to see you, Jared. So from a globe standpoint, if you're going from, for people that are hearing this for the first time, if you're going from like Sydney, Australia to Rio or Buenos Aires, it should be a straight shot across the South Pacific Ocean, and it never is. 95% of the flights in the southern hemisphere are connections, and they're bad connections. They're freaking way out of it. So instead of these big arcing triangles, they become really, really shallow dog legs, and the chances of that happening statistically are very, very remote. But the other part of the second part of that, there's second stage, part B of that one. That one is that, which is why I did Clue 9, which is how do you hide something like that? Because people are saying, no, there's these non-stops, and I cannot tell you how many times they sent me the Auckland, New Zealand to Santiago, Chile. Everybody sent me that, to the point where I had to make Clue 9 just to shut them up, which was, it's like, oh, no, you can get a non-stop. And I go, okay, fine. And then when I started looking, and then I saw the flights being dropped off of GPS in the southern hemisphere, then I saw it. I was already hooked by that point, but then I said, oh, that's so clever. Because what you're doing is you're hiding the routes, because that's the second part of this, and that is if you find a nonstop flight, you don't want to show them how that nonstop flight got from point A to point B, so you hide it. You disappear the flights. It doesn't happen in the northern hemisphere. GPS, an American military system called global positioning, should not lose flights anywhere. And it does. There's no coverage below the equator over the water.
And when I've looked at the Sydney, Australia to Santiago flight, a Qantas flight, on a Flight Radar 24, it lists the flights that are currently in the air, and that specific Qantas flight was not listed, which was a very curious thing for me.
Basically, Mark, you're saying that your three reasons for trying to argue for the spinning ball not working, the flight pass, the GPS, and Antarctica. Just focusing on the flight pass there. Yep. If you or if someone that you trusted could take a direct flight from Sydney to Santiago, Chile, and the flight time fit in with the ball model but not in with the flat Earth model, which suggests that Santiago and Sydney are much further apart, if the flight time fit in based on the plane and the maximum speed of the plane fit in only with the ball and not the flat Earth model, would you have to revisit the flat Earth model, or would you have a way of getting around that?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. There's nothing at this point that's going to make me really refute the flat Earth model, and here's why. Which is, again, why I did Clue 9, which is because I get this question just about every week, and that is, look, you may be able to book the flight. And I know some people said, well, they're phantom flights, and you may not be able to do it. And I know that there's one of my videos, or one of the people that I subscribe to, he did a thing called Airline Routes Exposed, where even the nonstop flights, some of those take these weird little stops, these fuel stops. And technically, if you do a fuel stop and nobody gets on or gets off, it still counts as a nonstop. But I don't even pay attention to that. For me, it still comes down to the routes. And that is, fine, you may be able to get from point A to point B. You may be able to get on a plane in Santiago, Chile, and land in Auckland, New Zealand, or Sydney, Australia. But you cannot prove the route. That's my big hang-up, and that is because once you get over the water, deliberately, the plane immediately goes into estimated mode or approximated mode. It drops off the screen, and at that point, you have no idea. The plane could be going through a freaking wormhole, and you'd never know it because there's no way to prove it. There's no system in place. Even though it's supposed to be tracking it, it doesn't. Again, people have said, well, we should, get a fund. I think there's some fund me pages where, I don't know if you guys are one of the ones that are doing it. It's like, look, that you'll get on a plane, from Santiago to Auckland. It's like, no, don't waste your money, because you still, even if you're on that plane, you're not going to be able to prove how it goes there. Yeah, you may be able to take some snapshots out the window, but you're not going to know where you are. An ocean's an ocean. And,
sure, but can't we do some basic mathematics? We can look at the maximum speed of the plane. We can look at the flight times. Then we can just do some basic elementary mathematics. If you've flown from Sydney to Santiago, Chile, just to take one example, and you've
Yeah.
done it in 11 hours or whatever the time is, if you can just time the amount of time, yes, you don't know exactly what route you've taken, but if it's a 10 or 11 hours, whatever the case may be, then we can do some basic maths, and it simply wouldn't work on the flat Earth map. I mean, unless you're going to try and say that maybe the plane is traveling well above its maximum speed or something.
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that on a flat Earth map, the route that you would normally take, or over that ocean, the South Pacific Ocean, which you're supposed to be taking, that part of the map becomes stretched and much longer. Basically, the map is so wrong that the only way you can make that flight is you have to take a shortcut, a huge shortcut across oceans that you're not supposed to, bodies of water you're not supposed to go through, and land that you're not supposed to go through. And that accounts for the time that you're talking about.
But you see what I mean? If we're on a ball, then I should be able to go sort of underneath the ball to get from Sydney to Santiago. If we're on a flat Earth map, I have to go right around. And even if it's a straight line, on the flat Earth model, like these southern hemisphere, just call it hemisphere, these southern hemisphere flights, the distance is simply much greater than it would be on a ball. So if we make it in the time that fits the ball, then it doesn't fit the flat Earth map, does it? Unless we're going much faster.
Unless you're going much faster, or unless the distances are wrong. The problem is that even the AE map, we don't know, because remember, I treat the AE map, and I think Jeranism does too, as a literal thing, but we don't know the actual perspective as far as the distances between segments on the AE map, because we're treating it as literal, but nobody knows exactly what it looks like, which is, by the way, to digress real quick, on Jeranism's laser test that he's going to do, he's doing it from a purely tabletop flat model, where and that follows the Eric Dubé model as well, whereas I follow the flattened stationary Earth model from 1830 by Orlando Ferguson. So even then, what I'm trying to get is we don't know the exact distances on a flat model because it's never been shown. We don't have a truly accurate map because we don't know the curvature. We don't know if there's any curves at all. So for me, yeah, there is some speculation there, but no, I'm still, there's no way I'm backing up.
One of the things that you've been criticized for, Mark, on say Dubai's forum, not necessarily by Dubai specifically, but just by people, is that you don't focus on these easily provable scientific methods for disproving the ball Earth. Are you planning to make a video in the future talking about the lack of curvature? Is that something that you have no interest in making any videos about whatsoever?
No, for me, and I've stated this at a few other things I've done, which is, look, I don't mind. I love the fact that Jeranism, one of the big reasons I don't do it is because other people are going to do it. And it wasn't a make it or break it thing for me. The curvature of the Earth, again, because I don't necessarily subscribe to it, the tabletop model, the curvature isn't as important to me. But I understand it. I mean, it has to be done. It has to be covered. I'm not going to be covering it. I like the broad strokes. I like the big ones that everyone can get their head around. Again, the curvature argument is not for everybody. It might be for everybody in this forum and maybe people that are listening, but there's a lot of people out there that have no idea what you're talking about when you're talking about the curvature. Or gravity for that example. Although I think the gravity test is still very, very good. And not necessarily where you're talking about the planes going from east to west or west to east, but the weight difference, the centrifugal force problem going from the North Pole to the equator, and that is if the equator is spinning at 1,100 miles an hour and the North Pole it's spinning at 0 miles an hour or 3 or whatever you want to call it, then a weight, once you measure something up there at the North Pole and you take it down, assuming it's not a human being where the weight fluctuates, a flat weight, and you take it down to the equator, it should be measurably less. Maybe even a fraction of an ounce, but it should be less. That, I think, is a more interesting test. Now, will I get into it? Yeah, maybe, but I've talked about it enough in interviews. I'm hoping that somebody else will dig into it. Will I touch on it personally? Probably not.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you what, we're quickly running out of time on tonight's show, so if it's all right with you, Mark, I'll pitch a few questions at you based on some of the criticisms that have come your way. This is natural in the work that we're doing. People will be out there trying to debunk you because you're debunking NASA and what have you. So do you mind if I just ask you a couple of quick questions to do with your persona in the Flat Earth movement?
Sure.
There's some people out there who have criticized you for the pyramids in your avatar on YouTube, for holding balls like globe Earths when you're doing interviews on YouTube and on Skype, and for constantly referring to your model, from a game development point of view, rather than focusing on some of these geophysical aspects like the lack of curvature or like the centrifugal thing you just touched on. These are the kind of criticisms that people make. Do you think there's any validity to those criticisms at all, or do you just fob them off?
No, well, I get it. Look, the conspiracy world, and I'm with you there, is a suspicious group, no question. Trust no one at face value. I totally understand that. And I get the argument. It's like, well, no, you're going to make all conspiracy people look crazy. And I'm going, well, you didn't. That aura is already there. When it came to the pyramids, okay, look, I went to Egypt, had a lot of fun, but you got to understand why I went to Egypt in the first place, and that was I was suspicious of the pyramids themselves. I wanted to see it and look and say, okay, could mankind have built this? Especially ancient cultures. And when I looked at it, that's what I went there to prove. So we took some great shots when I was there, and no, I didn't put them in because I'm a big fan of pyramids. I was just there. I thought it was a kind of a cool shot. It has nothing to do with anything. As far as holding the globe in some of my early videos, that's because it was really more of a prop, and I think when the interviewers actually said before he got me, he's going, "Don't use the globe anymore." Not because he didn't like he thought it was a mixed message or anything, but he says, "Look, it's played out." He goes, "You don't need to use that prop anymore. People have already seen it." But that's what I was really going for. It was just a prop I was saying, "Look, this is what I was trying to disprove. This is the lie." And if I had a flat model, if I had I didn't want to use some like hand-painted cheesy dinner plate with a flat Earth model on it. Otherwise, I would have had that. And I know some people are thinking of doing 3D modeling, using a 3D printer to do a flat Earth model, and that's great. If you can pull that off, fantastic. And what was the third thing? Pyramids, globes, and wasn't there something else?
Well, you constantly refer to your model from a game developer.
Oh, from a gaming standpoint. Yeah. Look, I used to produce games for a living. I helped design these things. So from a game standpoint, from a design standpoint, that is my perspective. That's how I got these clues wouldn't have been made without that sort of background for me. And that was, I looked at this thing from a functional, I said, look, if I had to design it, if I had to build this, what would I do? And that's what is really what got me going, to where once I started digging into it, I was going, man, I don't think I could, and of course, there's arrogance for you. I couldn't improve on this design. It's fantastic. It's brilliant on multiple levels. So yeah, when I refer to it, I'm always looking at it. I mean, I still play games now. After I'm done with you guys, I may actually fire up Warcraft and start playing it a little bit. So I'm not going to back off from that either. From a gaming design standpoint, that's where my head is at. Again, I will, but it ties a little bit into the curvature stuff. I like the flat and stationary Earth model, the one with this, it's shaped sort of like a roulette table, because it's more elegant from a design standpoint. It's more elegant. Does that mean that it's right? No, not necessarily. If Eric Dubé's model or Matt Boylan's model, if it turns out to be tabletop flat, hey, fantastic. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I will not cry in a corner.
A lot of people, they've seen your clues, they've then gone on to do their own research, they've discovered the Bedford level experiments, they've discovered people like Jonism doing their own experiments. So even though your clues don't cover this stuff, you have got lots of people all around the world going and doing their own research. So I think if you are a shill, you're doing a terrible job, unless this is a long-term game. Now, let me throw something to you, Mark, and then we'll go around the panel to get their opinions. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dylan Avery, but he's the character who released the first Loose Change back in December 2005. Loose Change.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
So when I saw Flat Earth Clues, I thought, is this guy paying homage to September Clues in any way?
No,
is it a coinky dink?
Yeah. I would say no, not at all. In fact, I was a Loose Change guy.
Ah.
I followed the Loose Change series.
Well, that's where you're supposed to go first. It's laid out.
Yeah, and that's all I really knew. For a while there. And so that's really, it didn't take much convincing for me with the whole 9/11. And the Loose Change stuff almost didn't come out. Boeing threatened to sue the Loose Change guys on their first edition.
I think I don't have much doubt at this point that that's all controlled opposition. I mean, after all, Vladimir Lenin said the best the only way to control the opposition is to lead it. I think that there's no doubt that it's part of all major media, military media psyop hoaxes, is they manage the opposition. So that was a controlled leak, just like when they release water from a dam, they don't just blow the dam up and let it flow out. It's released carefully to relieve any kind of tension, pressure, growing opposition. So forgive me, but that is why I'm skeptical about just about anything that comes out.
So let me pitch something to you guys, and we'll go to you first, Mark. Basically, Dylan Avery released Loose Change, and he was the one that released the film, talking about missiles under the plane and really muddying the waters from the start. But where he really seemed to side for people was that now he says that he doesn't think Bush could plan a bowl of cereal, and he says that the conspiracy world is a dark, dangerous world, the world of conspiracy. It is easy to get sucked in and really hard to get back out. And so there's this notion out there now that Avery was right from the start meant to muddy the waters as best as he could, and then once he'd done that job, to then come out and say, no, the 9/11 conspiracy stuff, it's all crazy. Look at me, I was a leading conspiracy theorist. Now I've changed my mind. So anyone who's still in there, they've just been sucked in like I was. You can see where I'm going with this. So there's this idea that whether it's Mark Sargent or Eric Dubai or John LeBon or Jeranism or any of the people, and I don't mean to put myself in your category, but you get what I'm going with here. It could be any of this. There's this idea that someone will get a following and then all of a sudden flip and say, oh no, this was all just an academic experiment to see how gullible conspiracy theorists are. There's this idea that eventually someone's going to flip and make us all look silly as part of a long-term game. So I want to know, Mark, if you think that this is possible, that this program's already started, and if you can see this happening, and then we'll go through the round table and get people's opinions.
Okay, it is possible, and that question has been posed to me before, although not in quite that way. I like the way you put it. And that is, look, could it happen? Yes.
We're the smallest club in the world. Of all the conspiracies I wanted to join up on, because I didn't post any, I haven't posted anything on anything, not Apollo, not 9/11, not Pearl Harbor, not really much of anything. So,
well, that's good, because now you're known as the flat Earth guy.
Yeah, exactly. So now apparently I've become the flat Earth authority overnight.
And I thought that Matt guy, and you put him in your video, the Matt NASA comedy guy.
Matt Boylan, yeah.
I was pretty sure he was controlled opposition. He was acting very irrationally in his videos, which indicated he was just trying to attach crazy. I thought he was attaching crazy to the thought.
I initially was suspect too, but I actually spoke with him, and
did you?
He called me.
Yeah, did you? Because I reached out to him and he ignored me, which I guess is easy to do, but still.
I think he's trying to build, and rightly so. He was looking for some sort of catalyst in this movement because he's never really backed away from it. Basically the story. Do you know anything about that? His backstory on that one.
No, I always thought he was controlled opposition. He's just spinning crazy to this whole idea.
His original interview, in my opinion, is just brilliant, and it gets a lot of hits, on a lot of mirrors.
This is where he's walking around on the earth.
Oh yeah, again, he's a performance artist.
Okay,
and he's a stand-up comedian, and
but he's
in 2 different languages. Plus, he's French. Stuff like that, but it's a great interview. I highly recommend it.
Well, I'm going to watch it. I got it queued up. It'll be on my next audio that I'm listening to. And I thought he was a goof, but you telling me that it's not a goof?
No, he's not. He's not a goof. Unfortunately, he's a fault against himself in this case, because he's got that one interview which his girlfriend did, which is, again, I consider just brilliant. But he's got so many other videos where he's doing, he's just going off on just tears, and it's tough. It's tough to listen to sometimes because, again, he's passionate. But that's the grounding one. You'll understand when you see it. It's that's where he gets, that's the fan base right there, from this sector is just particularly that one video. He's got some others, or I think he's been drinking a little bit, but yeah. Anyway, that's my take.
What?
As far as creating the dome, I didn't want to. You can't have it spread out forever when you're trying to explain it to people, because people they want some sort of compartmentalization. It's like, okay, they want the beginning and the end of the movie. They want some sort of space in between that they can get their head around.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, okay, we'll start with the dome, and if it's bigger than that or if it's weirder than that, we can go from there. But
does there have to be a dome? No, I don't even know if there has to be a dome.
There doesn't have to be a dome, but it makes it easier if it is.
What's it made of? And how much do the window cleaners get to clean it? I want that contract.
Nice. And who's the maintenance crews? And, are they flying around?
Where's the rope?
Spaceship. Where's the rope? No.
Your arguments are very clear. They're very persuasive. And
I have to admit, though, I did have sort of an unfair advantage there because I used to do classroom training for proprietary software.
Okay.
When I was doing stuff for time and attendance.
I was going to ask. So you must have had all the software, slide presentation, syncing of the audio
actually,
to the
that stuff. I mean, I kind of pasted that together, but the whole concept of because for years I would train people on basically the basic taking complex stuff and breaking it down to where they could really understand it, to where it would really drive home, and it didn't take very long. They wouldn't have these gaps where they'd fall asleep. And so when I was doing this, for whatever reason, it just came very, very naturally. And I was surprised again. The worst conspiracy of all time, and here I am now. Not only believing it but preaching it. So
Rodney King, can't we all just get along?
Right? Can't we just get along? I didn't. That's all I said. Yeah. And in that comment, I think I was the first one to ever mention your name, and just taking.
God.
I know, my mistake. But I think taking into everything I knew about that forum and what they were kind of going for in those conversations, they weren't talking about you specifically, but there was a lot of shill talk, shill behavior this, shill behavior that. So I just said, I don't care who's a shill. I said, if Mark Sargent's a shill, so be it. His true colors will show. Well, then they popped in right after and said, hey, we agree with everything you said, except the part where you said we need to wait and see if Mark shows his true colors.
Okay.
That he's already shown them. He is a paid NASA shill. Oh yeah, this is.
Oops. That was weird. As soon as you said that, my shelf almost fell over.
Oh boy.